Welcome back, everybody, to another thrilling episode of Thrive Suit Program with Coach 2Js. This is your host, Jeremy Jones, and today we're going to talk about not hyperextending your back on burpees, which kind of links back to one of our previous videos around the abdominal muscles and the low back, as well as going over this new workout, Green Gecko. So one of the things that we always want to remind people of, and this is where I think burpees get a bad rap, is that when people are doing burpees, we tend to see this hyperextension of the low back when they're doing it. So this would be their hips and then their legs, right? And as they're coming up, especially when they get fatigued, they tend to just peel themselves up off the ground, and then they eventually get to their knees, which is when they pop up, right? What we actually want to see is want to make sure that people are doing, they have their nice normal lumbar curve. I don't know if that's normal, but it's close enough. Then their hips, and then their knees and their feet. And so we want a straight line between their knees, their hips, and their shoulders when they come up. So their abs need to be turned on so they're not hyperextending their back. Because what we see is that that hyperextended back, and then this is the hallmarks of a bad burpee. So we see that hyperextended position here at the bottom, and then when they get up, their arms are here, their head's here, and they're rounded over, right? And then their knees and their feet. So they're going from that hyperextended to hyperflex position over and over again in a workout, and it just tends to be messy, right? So it's really hard on the back, and it can cause all kinds of back issues. And one of the things that I found personally is that I'll have people complain about back issues a day or two after a burpee workout, even though maybe we didn't do anything that was, like heavy deadlifts or squats or anything that would cause any back issues. Maybe they didn't work out at all, and their back's bothering them a day or two later. And it's usually because we did a number on their back, or they did a number on their own back during a burpee heavy workout. Now today's workout's not too bad with only 8 bootlegger burpees, but we just still want to reinforce that we don't want to hyperextend our back on burpees, and we want to go slow enough because it's a practice context that's capable. Now, one thing I will point out also with the practice context, we don't want to just gloss over it every time. It's not something we need to bring up every class, but periodically, every couple of weeks or every week or so, just remind people, hey, this is a practice context. We want to see that intensity level of 80, 90, definitely no more than 95%, whether it's lifting or Metcon. We're always saving some in the bank because we're not good judges of how hard we're pushing ourselves after the workout has started. It's kind of like after someone's been drinking and they've had 5 drinks and they're like, I'm fine, I can have another one, I'm not drunk. It's like, well, you're not the best judge because you've been drinking. When someone's WOD drunk, they're not the best judge of how hard they're going. And so, even with lots of practice and education, it's important that they go into the class and the workout, especially with the intent that this is a practice day. I'm focusing on form. I'm not trying to kill myself. Of course, at the end, if they paced a little too much, they can kind of push themselves on the last workout and they're still going to get a good workout in. That's always a better way to approach a workout, especially these Metcons, because they always look easy on paper, than to just come at it as hard as we can on the first round because they feel good, and then the wheels fall off at the end, right? That's how people end up getting hurt. So we've got our dynamic warm-up option here, then we're doing some hip activation. Just remember that this isn't always static stretching, especially when we're doing lifting, but just think about tissue maintenance, rolling and lacrosse balls and massage, maybe some positional static drills, but it doesn't always have to be these static stretching. Now for today, because we're doing some pause power snatch plus 2 overhead squats, or pause squat snatch plus an overhead squat, either one, because we've got some of those coming up later this week, it might be good to just kind of work on that hip mobility that's going to help them get into the bottom of that overhead squat. As usual, if somebody can't do the snatches because of the overhead position or whatever, just have them do cleans instead. And this is again where we work into that, those more advanced movements. We can include them because we're spending time practicing them. Where I think there's a disconnect when people talk about not snatching in CrossFit classes. They're talking about not doing it in Metcons, when there's a time, or going super heavy. People don't need to learn how to squat snatch to be fit. That's very true. But if we do spend a little bit of time practicing the skill, over time they'll get more and more competency. If they can't do a squat snatch or an overhead squat, that's a red flag or a signal that there's other issues going on. So if you work with this person for a few years and they still don't improve, you might just give them a pass and say, you know what, this person never is going to do what they need to do. But if you can get people to get their minds around learning these movements and doing things on their own, or really being diligent when it comes to the mobility and the other things, then you can get them to the overhead squat. Because somebody who can do an overhead squat properly means that mechanically they're in a much better position, and they're less likely to get injured, and they'll be able to do other movements outside of the gym. It's not because they're ever going to overhead squat or snatch outside of the gym, but it's because it's a tool for diagnosis of other issues. All right, Green Gecko is a 4 cycles, so it's going to be 6 minutes with 2 minutes rest between cycles. We're going to start with the row buy-in, then we're going to get off the rower and do max rounds of 8 bootlegger burpees, 16 Russian kettlebell swings. So this is going to be a gasser, right? We're doing a lot of rowing. These bootlegger burpees are actually a little bit more intense than burpees if people push themselves on that run, right? So this is the video where it's basically a burpee where we touch our chest, run 10 feet, turn around, which is where the name comes from, drop down and do another one. So the down and then the run is 1 burpee. Just the run replaces the jump, the jumping jack or the jump. And then 16 swings. Remember, Russian kettlebell swings tend to be a little bit more cardiovascular because they're higher cycle time, they're a little bit faster. And it's also important why we don't want people hyperextending their back, because if they're hyperextending their back on the bootlegger burpees, then the kettlebell swings are going to be a lot, combined with kettlebell swings, it's going to be really hard on people's backs if they're not careful. And you think about the row, yeah, so it's all bad. But we've got, so make sure they're being good on that. And then there's 2 minutes rest. So it's totally fine, for people to push themselves a little bit because of that full 2 minutes rest. Now, as usual, the first 2 minute rest will probably feel a little bit long. The second 2 minute rest will feel okay, and then the last 2 minute rest will probably feel like it's not enough. The other thing is if you don't have enough rowers, you should be able to do at least, if you have half as many rowers, it should be very doable. You can see here that the athletic is 500 meters. So for most people, that's going to be about a 2 minute to 2.5 minute 500 meters, and again, 2.5 minutes, 600 meters for most men. And then they're going to have the rest of that time to do the rounds. Now, if you could probably squeeze in a third heat. So if you have 1/3 of the amount of rowers, let's say you have 15 people in your class, and you have 5 rowers, you should be able to stagger them. What I would do is, again, stagger them 2.5 minutes, and then because that'll put you at 7.5 minutes, and this is an 8-minute cycle, right? 6 minutes with 2 minutes rest. So then you shouldn't have anybody kind of running into each other. And if somebody can't finish the row in 2.5 minutes, then they just need to get off, right? So the row should not take more than 2.5 minutes, whatever option they pick. Even if they start with 500 meters and they drop down to 400, that's fine. The team version is here too. So if you have half as many rowers as people, you might just want to do a team version. One person's going to row while the other one gets round. So one person's going to start on the burpees and the kettlebell swings, and then they'll switch, and then they will finish before they should finish, right? If they're each person takes 2.5 minutes or less before the 6 minutes, then they both get rounds. So then they're still going to get the 2 minutes rest. And I wanted to do that so that we still have this 2 minute rest interval. What we're looking for, because I know people are still going to go probably harder than they realize, we're still trying to get to a specific intensity level and then maintain it. So that 2 minutes rest is to make sure that they're being safe, especially in the later rounds, and also kind of maintain a more consistent intensity as the workout goes on versus a really high intensity and then the wheels fall off, right? Should be about 6 to 10 rounds. It's kind of tricky with these workouts to guess, to estimate, using my spreadsheets and everything. So just bear that in mind. We do have I said here about 2 to 2:15 for the row, and then about 90 seconds per round after. And then there's a scale up here for people who want to do it. So, one thing to point out is if they do want to get some side planks, they can obviously alternate as desired. And they can break that 60 seconds up within the 2 minutes as much as they want. And maybe they only do it during the first round or the second. They don't have to do it every single round. But it should be about 30 minutes total time, which basically means, we've got an 8-minute cycle, and then another 8-minute cycle, and then a 6-minute cycle, right? So, then the third 8-minute cycle, which puts you at 24 minutes, and then the last 6-minute cycle is would put you at 30. So just keep in mind that if you are doing 3 heats, for example, that you'll want to budget that extra 2.5 minutes each, right? So if you had the first people go at 0, the second group go at 2.5, the third minute go at 5, third set go at 5, then you're going to have to add an extra 5 minutes to that. So you want to make sure you start this workout at about 22 after, no later than 25 after, so that you can still finish everybody on time. That's it for today, guys. Thanks a lot, and thrive on.